Jurors are now deliberating in the defamation trial against conspiracy theorist Alex Jones. They're deciding how much money he should pay to the parents of a 6-year-old Sandy Hook victim for repeatedly pushing deranged conspiracies that the murder of 20 first graders and 6 adults did not happen. The judge in the case denied Jones's request for a mistrial after it was revealed his lawyer accidentally sent 2 years of cell phone records and text messages to the parents' legal team. The parents' lawyer says multiple law enforcement groups are now seeking those texts, including the January 6th committee.
Requests from various federal agencies and law enforcement to provide that phone. Absent a ruling from you saying you cannot do that, Mr. Bankston, I intend to do so immediately following this one. I believe that there is absolutely nothing that Mr. Raynal has done to fulfill his obligations to protect his client and prevent him from doing that.
Who are you turning it over to? Are
Right
you allowed
now,
to say?
I've been asked by the January 6th committee.
Okay, CNN senior investigative correspondent Drew Griffin is with us now. So Drew, explain how those mistakenly disclosed texts were sent and used against Jones in court.
Well, if we believe it at face value, they were. It was a mistake by Jones' own attorneys who inadvertently sent the files to Mark Bankston there. He is the attorney for the parents in this case. And Bankston cleverly used it 2 ways. One, to show that Alex Jones was and is and has always been a liar, which is at the heart of this case, but also to reemphasize why we are here in this stage. Remember, there was no trial. Alex Jones was basically lost this case by default after years of failing to disclose information to the plaintiffs. So at this very moment in the trial, the last witness to take the stand, Alex Jones is there under cross-examination. Mark Bankston just hit him right between the eyes with this.
12 days ago, your attorneys messed up and sent me an entire digital copy of your entire cell phone with every text message you've sent for the past 2 years. As of 2 days ago, it fell free and clear into my possession. And that is how I know you lied to me when you said you didn't have text messages about Sandy Hook. Did you know that?
I told you the truth. This is your Perry Mason moment.
It certainly was very damning. On the January 6th, you know, Alex Jones was called before the January 6th committee. He says he pled the 5th. Also on these messages, we learned in court, maybe some intimate language between Alex Jones and his friend Roger Stone, who was also called before the January 6th committee and also pled the 5th. Easy to see why the January 6th committee, Allison, would be so interested in what's on that text phone.
Intimate language, intriguing. Drew Griffin, thank you very much. Let's bring in Harry Litman, who helped lead the Justice Department as Deputy Assistant Attorney General. He also served as U.S. Attorney. We also have CNN legal analyst Areva Martin. She's a civil rights attorney. And Ellie Honig is our CNN senior legal analyst and a former federal and state prosecutor. Ellie, let me start with you. So Alex Jones's attorneys filed a mistrial, asked for, I guess, a mistrial because of these text messages, and the judge denied it.
Right. So this happens sometimes, Allison. It's called inadvertent disclosure, where an attorney for one party mistakenly sends information, text documents over to the other side. And what you normally do is say, whoops, you weren't supposed to see that. Perhaps they were privileged between attorney and client, perhaps between spouses, so I'd like them back. And I think the response here from the plaintiffs was, yeah, but we were entitled to these documents in the first place. These are not privileged. These are not attorney-client communications. These are the kind of documents that we requested and we're entitled to, so now we have them and now we're going to use them, and it looks like the judge sided with the plaintiffs here.
Harry, I'm surprised to hear Ellie say that this happens from time to time. I thought that this was gross negligence. I mean, sending to the victim's attorney the texts of Alex Jones. I didn't know if it was that they're sabotaging their own client or what that is. How do you explain it?
Yeah, it's stunning. It does happen sometimes, but it's always followed with this privilege motion, as Ellie says, and then they're returned. In this case, for some reason, adding insult to injury, the plaintiffs didn't make that motion. They just sat silent and, moreover, let him be bludgeoned in this Perry Mason moment that you've described going forward. So it's both astonishing and very rare. I've received things like this sometimes, but you always give them back because there's always the claim of privilege. Here, they just didn't make it. Alex Jones is now looking in quick succession at a gargantuan verdict in this trial, the immediate turning over to the January 6th committee, unless the judge stops him, of these emails, and a very possible perjury prosecution in either Texas or by the DOJ. And, you know, it couldn't happen to a nicer guy.
Well, I mean, Areva, a perjury prosecution would make sense. He's a pathological liar. He claimed that the sickening mass shooting at Sandy Hook was staged. I mean, obviously, there's no amount of money that can ever make up for the trauma that he has inflicted on these parents. And he's still lying. So listen to the times that Alex Jones was caught lying in this courtroom.
You say, Mr. Jones, that you're taking these court proceedings seriously. You're approaching them in good faith. But the truth of the matter is, you've been broadcasting repeatedly a picture of our judge on fire, haven't you?
Objection compound, Your Honor.
No.
The person on the left of this image is our judge, correct?
Yes.
The person on the right is another judge you don't like, right?
Yes.
Okay.
It's just bizarro world, Areva. So how does all that impact the jury?
Yeah, you know, Allison, Ellie, and Harry said this happens occasionally, and I agree with them. It does happen occasionally, but what typically also happens is more competent lawyering on the side of the person that mistakenly provides these documents. It does not appear that Alex Jones was prepared at all. He continued to lie, even though his attorneys knew that the plaintiff's attorney had access to these text messages and emails. So he sat there and said he didn't make fun of the court proceedings, yet they know, the attorneys presumably knew that he had, because it's in those text messages. I don't know what to make of this other than Alex Jones, like so many of the folks who are in Donald Trump's orbit, believe that they are above the law and that they can walk into a courtroom and do things that other individuals who are brought into court aren't allowed to do. They wouldn't turn over documents, even though this court made repeated orders for him to do so. This is why he's facing these default judgments. And now, as Harry said, this is just a matter of how much money these plaintiffs and other plaintiffs who have gotten default judgments are going to get as a result of the heinous conduct of Alex Jones.
So, Ellie, as we've been discussing, the January 6th committee wants to see these texts. What are they looking for?
Well, I think they want to see any communications between Alex Jones and anyone around Donald Trump. We've had reporting that there was communications between Alex Jones and Roger Stone. I mean, imagine what is in those.
Excuse me, intimate language between them.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure what that means,
Me
but who knows? I'm sure January 6th committee members will find out. But Alex Jones was one of the biggest and continues to be one of the biggest purveyors of the lie that underlies all of this, the lie of election fraud. He aggressively pushed it, actually similar to the way he pushed the lie about Sandy Hook. This is what he does. This is his MO. And I think what the committee wants to see is, was there any coordination, any connection between those lies coming from Alex Jones and from people in the White House around Donald Trump?
Harry, very quickly, he's claiming bankruptcy. Alex Jones is claiming bankruptcy, though he's made hundreds of millions of dollars peddling his garbage. So how will that work? I mean, will the victims ever get the $150 million if that's the judgment against him?
They'll get everything he has. He is claiming it. He's lying again. And by the way, that's another possible prosecution against him for bankruptcy fraud. And if the DOJ gets into the act, this is a really unusual, clear-cut case of perjury and potentially bankruptcy fraud. And that's just the third sledgehammer that's about to come down on his head.